All right, today we are going to talk about slopes of lines. And the key concept there on page 188 says that the slope of a line is the ratio of the change in y to the change in x. Your y-axis is your vertical axis and your x-axis is your horizontal axis. So you could say it's vertical change over horizontal change, or we can say that slope equals rise over run. And the way we determine the rise over the run is we find the difference in the y values, which is our y sub 2 minus our y sub 1, and we divide that by the difference in our x values, so x sub 2 minus x sub 1. And that's for any point, any 2 points on the line that you're trying to find the slope of. So if you look at example 1 down there on the bottom of the page, all right, you're asked to find the slope of each line. So example 1a there. Find the slope.
Yes.
Set it down, please.
Okay.
And if you're asked to find the slope of each line, the first thing you're going to want to do is to identify the coordinates of the points. So if we take point J that's on that line in the example, J has coordinates of -1, -2. And K has coordinates. We got an X value of 3 and a Y value of 3. So we're going to take these values and we're going to substitute them into our slope formula. But what I'd like you to do first is to label the points. So point J has an X sub 1 and a Y sub 1. And then point K has an X sub 2 and a Y sub 2. So now we can find the slope of this line. And the lowercase script m is the symbol for slope, because in the slope-intercept form of a line, which is y equals mx plus b, whatever's sitting in this position, the m position, the spot between the equal sign and the x, is the slope. So we're going to use the m here. So we're going to take our y sub 2, which is 3, minus our y sub 1, which is -2. And we're going to divide that by our x sub 2, which is 3, minus our x sub 1, which is -1. Now look, the formula is always subtracting. So be careful when your values are negative, because you're subtracting a negative. And when you subtract a negative, you change the symbol and you change the sign. So 3 minus negative 2 is the same as 3 plus 2. You get a 5. And 3 minus negative 1 is the same as 3 plus 1, which is 4. So the slope of that line is positive 5/4. All right, let's look at example B on the top of page 189. We're going to take line L, or point L, and we're going to find its coordinates. It looks like the x is at negative 2, and the y is at 3. We got point M, that is at positive 1 on the x-axis, and 1, 2, negative 3 on the y-axis. So we've got our x sub 1 and our y sub 1, and our x sub 2 and our y sub 2. So our slope is equal to negative 3 minus 3 over 1 minus negative 2. So negative 3 minus 3, that's negative 6. And we're subtracting a negative again. So we get a 1 plus 2, which is 3. Now, this negative 6 over 3 simplifies to negative 2. So the slope of this line is just negative 2. Any questions on finding the slope of a line when you're given the line on the coordinate plane? All right. Then let's make sure you've got this summary in your notes. Down on the bottom of page 189, positive slope. Positive sloped lines, they go up and to the right, don't they? Negative slope. All right, if a line has a negative slope, then it goes up and to the left. Then we've got zero slope. Zero slope. That's a horizontal line. All right, and then finally we've got undefined slope. And that's a vertical line. All right, positive goes up and to the right, negative up and to the left. Zero slope is a horizontal line, and a line with an undefined slope is a vertical line. All right, and maybe put a note here. That would be anything with a 0 in the denominator. If you ever happen to type into your calculator any number divided by 0, so take 5 divided by 0 equals you get an error message on your screen. And that's because anytime there's a 0 in the denominator, then the ratio is undefined. You cannot divide by 0. All right, so let's look at the top of page 191 now. Because the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use the slopes of lines to determine the relationship between the lines. So we're going to say that parallel lines have the same slope. All right, parallel lines have the same slope. Perpendicular lines have slopes that are negative reciprocals. Parallel lines have the same slope. Perpendicular lines have slopes that are negative reciprocals. So we're going to do a little table. And in this first column of the table, we're going to call it line 1, line 2, and relationship. And right here is going to be the slope. So what we're listing here is the slope of the line. The slope of line 1. Let's say it has a slope of 1/2. And then line 2 has a slope of 1/2. What is the relationship between those two lines? They're parallel. Good. Let's say that the slope of our first line is negative 3/2. The slope of our second line is positive 2/3. The relationship of the two lines, they're perpendicular, aren't they? Negative reciprocal. All right? When we're talking about negative reciprocals, that means the slope has to have the opposite sign and the numerator and denominator switched. Opposite sign, numerator, denominator switched. Negative reciprocals, perpendicular lines. So let's say that we have a line 1, it's got a slope of 2. And line 2 has a slope of negative 1/2. They're perpendicular, aren't they? Because isn't this 2 the same as 2 over 1? All right, so look, we got a case here where we have opposite signs, and we have the numerator and denominator switched. So we've got perpendicular lines again. And remember the symbol for perpendicular is the upside down T. And perpendicular lines intersect at 90 degrees. And then the third type of lines that you'll see today is when line 1 has a slope of 3/4. Line 2 has a slope of negative 1/3. Are they parallel? The lines aren't parallel, are they? They don't have the same slope. Are they perpendicular? No, because their slopes aren't negative reciprocals, so the lines are neither. They're not parallel and they're not perpendicular. So today, when you're asked to determine whether the lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither, just find the slope of each line. Okay? So if we need to determine whether line AB and line CD are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. For A is at 1, 1. B is at -1, -5. C is at 3, 2. And D is at 6, 1. All right, so what you've got here is you've got two lines with 2 points. So we need to find the slope of line 1. So the slope of AB, I'm going to call AB line 1. So I'm going to go M sub 1 is equal to. We've got a y sub 2 minus a y sub 1. So -5 minus 1. And then our x sub 2 is -1 minus +1. And -5 minus 1 is -6. -1 minus 1 is -2. And -6 divided by -2 is 3. So then our second slope for line CD, I'm going to call it M sub 2. Y sub 2 minus y sub 1 is 1 minus 2. And our x sub 2 minus x sub 1 is 6 minus 3. 1 minus 2 is -1. And 6 minus 3 is 3. And this simplifies to -1/3. The slope of line 1 was 3, which is the same as 3 over 1. So what's the relationship between the lines? They're perpendicular. Their slopes are negative reciprocals of one another. All right. Any questions? All right, then your practice for today. It's on page 193. (16 through 19). And 28 to 31. And again, I'll remind you, be sure you're checking your odd answers in the back of the book.